Look at him, getting all hyped up. What's he gonna do? He's gonna her coming up out of the grave. Howdy, y'all. I'm Brylan. Any faithful Christian knows that there is a problem in the church today, and it's this: that the church should look and sound more like the world so it can attract the world and then flank them with the Bible. You know, I've personally been involved in and worked at churches that adopted these kind of mindsets, and I thank God that He delivered me out of them and used it to grow me. Inevitably, what happens, though, are churches end up becoming so much like the world that they then rationalize less and less gospel and Bible teaching, because now that we have worldly people in here, we don't want to push them away. You know, it's a vicious and honestly sly trick by Satan. In fact, real quick, I remember working at a very large mega church, like 20,000 people, when I was younger. And one of my friend's parents asked me one time what the sermon was about during one of the Christmas services, because they wanted to know if it was going to be too pushy with religious stuff. And I remember feeling in my heart and in my soul like a ton of bricks that God was convicting me on the spot for taking part in all of that. I was doing it ignorantly, but you know, that's not an excuse. But God did use it to shape me, and I am so thankful for that. You know, that's where this church comes in, Church of the Glades. This is a mega church that is probably the best example of this sly worldly takeover of the church that I have seen. I have done videos on them in the past, but the most shocking part of what I'm about to show you in this video is who this church is affiliated with. I'm going to show you that in just a minute. Let's not forget that the body of Christ isn't just in America. There are true churches all over the world that are being persecuted, and we need to pray for them. You know, that's why I use ground news, because not only do they show you how the left and the right are spinning the news, but you get stories that the mainstream media try to bury. Look at this. We see China detains dozens of underground church pastors in massive crackdown. Thankfully, the Trump administration presses China to release arrested Christians after crackdown on underground churches. Thank God we have an administration that's willing to push for this. You know, ground news also shows you what mainstream media outlets are being biased. Their blind spot feature shows you when the left or the right isn't covering the news that you should know about. You can also see who owns each news outlet. If you go to ground.news/Brylan or scan the QR code on the screen, you can get 40% off the same Vantage plan that I personally use. Thank you for supporting the sponsor of this video, Ground News. It helps me to continue to bring you daily news videos that you can trust. You know, a lot of people say that it's impossible for large churches to be biblical, churches of this size. And I vehemently disagree with that. It's like spitting on the blessing of growth that God has allowed for a particular faithful church. However, Church of the Glades is the prime example. It is everything that you think of that is wrong with mega churches. You don't have to be large to have these issues, but you know, we tend to think of mega churches as exactly what Church of the Glades is. And I want to show you that, because this is the kind of church that you should avoid at all costs. And it's not just this one. I'm going to show you some other examples here in just a second. But as we approach Halloween, they have things like rally nightmares. This is the kind of thing that you're seeing them do throughout October leading up to Halloween. This is literally one of the performances that they put on. These are like weekly performances. Now, I can't play the sound. Okay, I'll get copyright. But if you notice the lyrics, they're literally singing a song saying, "Are you ready? It's a Halloween house party. All my ghouls, it's Halloween house party. It's a Halloween house party. Come on, everybody, where are my ghouls at? Zombies and witches are all around me now." Where are the wolves at? The wolves are there. You are the wolves, and they're not even in sheep's clothing anymore. It's disgusting seeing churches do this kind of thing. And this isn't like some sort of performance that's wrapped up in a bigger gospel Bible truth proclamation or compare. It's none of that. This is literally just a performance that they are putting on, singing about witches and ghouls and zombies and wolves, purely for entertainment. In fact, the head pastor, this guy, he literally said this. He said, the church should have a show every weekend. We should have a show. I'll tell you why. For my super spirituals right now, don't log off, because Jesus promised in Matthew's gospel that anytime 2 or 3 or more would gather in his name, he would show. So that's why, that's how they justify doing these Halloween witches and ghouls, is because Jesus said that he would show if 2 or more are gathered. So they must put on shows. And again, it doesn't stop there. They even did, this was last year, they did a show. Okay, I can't play it again because they're singing a Taylor Swift song. Very horribly, by the way. Again, you're noticing the DEI aspect of it all. I digress. But what they're doing is they're singing a song by Taylor Swift called Look What You Made Me Do. Now, this is a song by Taylor Swift that is literally about coming back from the dead and getting revenge on her ex-lovers, because karma is such a sweet, sweet thing for her to witness. In fact, you can see in the music video, this is how the music video starts. It's Taylor Swift's reputation, her coming up out of the grave. Yeah, it's very demonic and suggestive as well, very sensual later on in the video. But it's about karma coming back to take out her ex-lovers, and they're just singing it in the church because Jesus said he would show in Matthew's gospel. And then I have to show you this. This is the head pastor's son. Remember this guy? He literally is the pastor of children, the youth. This is him. Can't play that again. Look at him getting all hyped up. What's he going to do? He's going to crowd surf on a bunch of children and then fall through them to the ground. That kind of made it worth it, I guess. But think about this for a second. A grown man jumping onto a bunch of children who are then going to touch his body and carry him. You know why people crowd surf? Because it's so cool. You know what happens during crowd surfing? People have a hold of your body and they're touching your body with their bare hands. They're touching all parts of you. And but here's a bunch of children he's trying to crowd surf on. And this is exactly what's wrong with a lot of mega churches and with a lot of churches in America, unfortunately. Now, I hate to harp on all churches in America like you can't have there's no faithful churches in America. There absolutely are. But it's just a symptom of a growing problem that's not getting fixed because you're called legalistic. You're called, they're even calling you bigots for calling out this kind of stuff. In fact, I actually agree with Megan Basham here. Do I want a smaller association so that this is not part of our representation? Yes. Yes, I do. I would rather be a smaller convention, but a more faithful one. This is appalling. Now, what she's saying is that she would rather the SBC be a smaller convention, a smaller denomination, so that this kind of stuff isn't a part of it. Because this Church by the Glades, is a Southern Baptist convention church. I know that's not super shocking for a lot of people, but a lot of people do think that the Southern Baptist Convention is still very conservative and biblical. And they have strayed from that so far. And it's so sad to see because they are the largest evangelical Protestant denomination in the United States, at least. Over 16 million people are a part of the Southern Baptist Convention. We've seen all kinds of lunacy come out of the SBC. And, I could sit here for hours. Literally, I mean that, hours showing all of the lunacy in the SBC and how far they have drifted and how sad it is. But I know a lot of faithful men and women in the SBC as well. So it's not all bad, but there's a takeover happening. And it's so clear with these kind of churches doing this kind of, and this is being funded by the SBC, by the way. Where do you think they get their funding? It's not just looting the pockets of these people who come in to watch these shows. No, it's SBC funding as well. In fact, a lot of churches will join the SBC just for the funding. That's where problems with other pastors in the SBC, very prominent, well-known pastors like J.D. Greear, for instance. This dude's a total joke, yet he's one of the most prominent pastors in the SBC. In fact, he was one of the heads of the SBC for a while. Tried to do did a very sly trick to try to trap some other people into accepting DEI and critical race theory in the SBC, like the actual SBC guidelines and laws that they have. Tried to get that to be voted on in a very sly way so that it would pass. Disgusting maneuvers and tactics. J.D. Greear literally advocates for gender justice. And he has adopted wokeness completely. Again, he tried to get everything woke passed through the SBC in a very, again, disgusting, behind-the-scenes, sly kind of movie tried to make to trick SBC into voting for things like critical race theory, which he affirms, and affirmative action type stuff. He also, at J.D. Greear's church, one of the worship leaders is as woke as you can be, pro-LGB, BLM, says America with the K, 3 Ks in it, and just all this super woke garbage from worship leaders at J.D. Greear's church. And these are the type of people that J.D. Greear sold out to and bows down to. In fact, J.D. Greear was also famously known to say that the Bible only whispers about like LGB and sexual sin, but it screams about pride and greed. He has surrounded himself with woke, pro-LGB, pro-critical race theory, DEI, all that kind of garbage. And even though we see literally and he's talking about Romans here, Romans 1, but yet we see in Romans 1 how God, how it says that God has given people who practice these things over to a debased mind. In fact, it says 3 different times how God has given them over and given them up to uncleanliness. And what is this uncleanliness? It's the lust of their hearts. And they dishonor their bodies in this lust. In fact, it says here, look at verse 26, for this reason God gave them up to vile passions, for even their women exchanged the natural use for what is against nature. Likewise also the men, leaving the natural use of the women, burned in their lust for one another, men with men committing what is shameful. And then it goes on to say, and even as they did not like to retain God in their knowledge, God gave them over to a debased mind, a mind that does not work properly. It is unfit. It is degraded. It doesn't work properly. And in the midst of this debased mind, they commit all these evil, wicked things. And it's not just LGB, but it is a major point in of sexual immorality talked about in these verses. Men doing shameful things with men and women doing things they know go against nature with other women. But it's just a whisper, according to J.D. Greear. This is why at this point it's really hard to recommend the SBC, Southern Baptist Convention churches. There are faithful ones. That's the hard part here, is how to save the faithful churches in the SBC while calling out and really disbanding these types of churches that bring shame on the name of Jesus. But hey, let me know your thoughts about all this in the comment section. I would love to hear from you. And if you wouldn't mind hitting that subscribe button, join this community. I would love to hear from you on a regular basis. And please hit that thumbs up button. You know, when you like this video, it'll get pushed out to more people and it would really help spread the truth. All right, I'll see you in the next video. Bye.